Get straight into it. Collingwood is the story still of the round of football gone, that is, on and off the field. Nathan Buckley's COVID breach put the president, Eddie McGuire, in an awkward spot after his comments earlier in the weekend that anyone caught breaching should be sent home.
So, he says, right, here's the rules. And then everyone, the great Australian tradition, as we're seeing right through society at the moment, is, OK, there's a rule, but it doesn't apply to me. And he's saying, right, OK, have you got it now? It applies to everyone. That rule book is not how do we get around every rule. That's the rule book you live by. And if you don't like it, we'll arrange for you to go home. Now, the AFL make the decisions, and then I support them 100%. Early on, my position was to go harder with sanctions and make it personal responsibility. That was not taken up by the AFL. They had a slightly less version, still onerous, these fines that have been meted out over the weekend to the clubs. Now, clearly, people want to change things around. They want to say that I said this and Buckley should have been said. No, I've said it from the word go. My position has been absolutely consistent. The AFL have taken a different path, and here we are.
That was Eddie this morning after his comments on the weekend. And then the backdrop of all that is a loss, which we'll get to as well in a moment, a shock loss. But, Caro, where does this leave the president after the comments?
Well, I have enormous sympathy for Eddie McGuire on this one. I thought I didn't like his response to the still side bottom issue. I thought he embarrassed his club and made it worse for his club. In this one, I agree with everything he said. I think the AFL should have been tougher, and I think Nathan Buckley owes him an apology. I think Nathan has actually let his whole club down. He's let his players down, and they've let him down in the past, and he's really let his president down.
But is Eddie McGuire saying there, though, that if he had his way, the 3 Hawthorn players who went to get food that should be sent home, and also Nathan Buckley should be on the first plane home if he had his way from the start and what he put forward to the AFL?
Look, he's gone soft on Nathan. He's saying he did say from now on they should be sent home, and he's rescinded that with Nathan. But, I mean, people would beg the question why Nathan got such a relatively limp fine, really. And I know he's shared it with Brenton Sanderson, and they both breached the COVID. In fact, Craig, let's have a listen to Nathan after the game against Fremantle last night.
Look, there have been 4 or 5 different iterations of what is allowed in hubs. I mean, and even the hotel we're in at the moment is not technically a hub, it's a hotel. It has changed and evolved, and there has been almost weekly updates or changes to what has occurred, and I'm not making an excuse, but that is a reality that clubs are facing, and there's probably some of the slip-ups that may have stemmed from that, but I need to be better. We need to be better.
Yeah, he does, and he was sort of making an excuse. It was an apology.
It wasn't an apology, like a hardcore apology, was it?
No, it wasn't. And look, Jake Nile wrote a really interesting column in The Age today, on the Age website today, saying Collingwood has a discipline problem. And frankly, they do. You can't look past that. I know that people make mistakes, and I know this is a terrible time and everyone is struggling and making mistakes. But it staggers me that the coach and the senior assistant would not have checked something as simple as that, to go and play tennis with someone else. Yeah. And imagine if it had put... Because the West Australian Premier is far tougher than even Anastasia Palaszczuk, who's been tough. Imagine if they'd put those games at risk.
Of all the people, he's been such a great beacon of hope through all this. I reckon the way he's handled himself's been magnificent, Nathan. You got so shocked when you saw that it was him, and you wonder where the upside was in taking the slight risk on that. And I wonder, Lordo, how much it affected the way that he coached the team on the weekend. It can't have been a good preparation, being isolated and getting tested and all that sort of things.
That's right, and it was interesting here. I found I've never seen Nathan. He may have been down there on occasions, but I've never seen him out of the coach's box before. And I just wondered whether, what a distraction the previous 24 hours would have been for his team, where they had to move a team meeting. I don't know if they had to move a captain's run as well. So the previous 24 hours before a game, suddenly everything's had to change. And I just wonder if he had suddenly thought to himself, I haven't been around the previous 24 hours. Do I need to go and sit on the bench to be with the players? So suddenly you have to start changing. Lee Matthews spoke over the weekend of how humiliated Nathan would have been, and then to cap it off with a loss to the Fremantle Dockers, it's been a horrible 48
against his former assistant Justin Longmuir, who was one of the secrets of their success a couple of years back when they started to play so well.
And Lordo and Kane, they're out of the 8, so they're in a spot here. It's come from nowhere quickly. The draw does open up a bit for them now, but they're playing poorly quickly all of a sudden.
I'll be interested to see what Kane thinks soon. But the average points is 62 per game, the average across the board. And they can't score at the moment, the Collingwood footy team. So we look at what they've done. There's a lot in this board, but They have scored 48 points against the Essendon Footy Club in round 5. They lost 59, 57, then 45 and 49 in the last 2 weeks. So that just puts so much pressure, Kane, on their back line. And they've got too many forwards out of form. You think of Jamie Elliott, Hoskin Elliott, Josh Thomas, Jaden Stevenson. It's hard to know who to trust down there. What do you make of it?
Oh, I think the good news for them is their draw is going to open up. Now, that should have started against Fremantle yesterday, but they do have Melbourne, Sydney and Adelaide in the next 3. So there's a really good chance they could be 7-4, but I'm shocked that they're 10th and 4-4. And the biggest issue for them, and I think it has been for the last season and a half, is capitalising on Brodie Grundy's hit-outs. Now, we regard him as the best ruckman in the game, but he's winning the hit-outs. They got beaten by clearances by 15 against the young Fremantle side, and Caleb Sarong in game number 3 had 9 clearances. So for basketball fans, you'd liken him to like a James Harden in the NBA, where they score a lot of points, they get big numbers, but they don't win. And that was the issue for them in the prelim final last year. 70 hit-outs he had, but they lose that game. So they have to come up with a way to capitalise on that, and it's been an issue for them for a long time.
Their depth is going to be interesting too. They perceive to have good depth, but whenever it gets tested significantly, it has struggled in more recent times. Pendlebury, when he's out, clearly the numbers fall right away, and to go, he's obviously the other one's out for a long time. So they've got to reinvent their season pretty quick here. They went into flag favourites, Lordo, and they're up against it.
As Kane said, they've got a nice 3 weeks on paper, but Fremantle was meant to be at the start of that. So, yeah, no Howe, massive loss. De Goey, huge. And Pendlebury through the midfield really hurt them on the weekend, where a young Fremantle side got a hold of them.